The year was 5024, and Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars. His ship was called the New Horizon, and it was not a warship. It was a research vessel built for science and exploration. Jake had been flying through space for 15 years, and he had never fired a weapon at another living being. The galaxy was peaceful. It had been peaceful for 3,000 years. The last Great War happened so long ago that most people only knew about it from old books and museums. Children learned about ancient battles the same way they learned about dinosaurs, as something that happened long ago and would never happen again. Jake's crew was small but skilled. Dr. Lisa Carter was their expert on old civilizations. She loved to study the ruins of ancient battles and figure out how people lived and fought thousands of years ago. Lisa was 35 years old, with short brown hair and curious green eyes. She spent most of her time reading old reports and examining artifacts from long-dead worlds. Pete Wilson was their chief engineer. He kept the ship running smoothly and could fix anything that broke. Pete was a big man with strong hands and a gentle smile. His great-grandfather had fought in the last real space battle anyone could remember. That was over 3,000 years ago. Pete sometimes told stories about his ancestor, but they seemed like fairy tales to most people who heard them. The New Horizon was currently orbiting a planet called Dust Rock. The planet had been the site of a major battle during humanity's expansion into space. Now it was empty except for old ruins and broken machines. Lisa wanted to study the battlefield to understand how humans used to fight. Jake watched Lisa work through the ship's cameras. She was down on the planet's surface, carefully examining old weapons and armor. Everything was covered in dust and rust. The metal had turned brown and orange after thousands of years of weather and time. "Find anything interesting down there?" Jake asked through the communication system. Lisa's voice came back through the speakers. "The usual stuff. Old guns, broken vehicles, some personal items from the soldiers. But Jake, there's something strange about this place." "What do you mean?" "Well, look at these weapon storage areas. They're built really well. Too well for something that's supposed to be abandoned. And some of this equipment, it looks like it's been maintained recently." Jake frowned. That didn't make sense. No one had lived on Dust Rock for hundreds of years. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. Old metal can look shiny sometimes when the light hits it right. "Maybe," Lisa said, but she didn't sound convinced. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, something very different was happening. Ambassador Claire Davis sat in a meeting room with representatives from dozens of different alien species. The room was bright and clean, with comfortable chairs and tables full of fresh food. Everyone was talking about art, science, and trade agreements. Claire was humanity's main representative to the Galactic Council. She was a smart woman in her 40s with gray hair and a warm smile. She had spent her whole career working for peace and cooperation between different species. The other ambassadors liked her because she was always reasonable and never caused trouble. The meeting was about organizing a galaxy-wide art festival. Different species would share their music, paintings, and stories. It was exactly the kind of thing that happened when civilizations had nothing to fight about. "I think human poetry would be wonderful for the opening ceremony," said Ambassador Zextai from the Rigel system. His species looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and extra arms. Humans always write such peaceful, thoughtful poems. Claire smiled and nodded. "We'd be honored to participate. I'll make sure to select some of our most beautiful works about friendship and understanding." None of the aliens at the meeting suspected that Claire Davis had spent 5 years in military intelligence before becoming a diplomat. Her personnel file said she was a literature professor. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Far away from the peaceful meeting in the dark space between star systems, a massive alien fleet was moving through the void. The ships were black and angular, built for war and intimidation. They belonged to the Vorthan Empire, a species that believed strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. War Commander Thexval stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying reports about human colonies. Thexval was 7 feet tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. His species had been conquering other worlds for over 1,000 years. They were very good at it. "The humans are perfect targets," said his intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Krellinex. "They have no military ships that we can detect. Their colonies have no weapons or shields. They spend all their time making art and studying old books." Vexval looked at the data on his screen. Human communications were full of messages about concerts, poetry readings, and scientific conferences. There was no talk of weapons, military training, or defense preparations. It seemed impossible that these soft creatures were descended from the species that had once fought brutal wars across the galaxy. "Are you certain about this information?" Vexval asked. "Completely certain, War Commander. We have been watching them for 2 years. They are weak. Their ancestors may have been warriors, but these modern humans care only about peace and comfort. They will surrender as soon as we show them our strength." Vexval nodded slowly. The Vorthan Empire needed new worlds to conquer. Their own planets were becoming crowded, and their people were always hungry for more resources. The humans controlled 17 star systems and 43 worlds. Taking those worlds would solve many problems. "How long until we reach their territory?" Vexval asked. 6 days, War Commander. We will strike their agricultural world first. It has 2 million humans and no defenses. When they see what we can do, the rest will surrender without a fight. Back on the New Horizon, Jake was having dinner with his crew in the ship's small dining room. They were eating food that came from packages, but it tasted good enough. Pete was telling a story about his great-grandfather's war experiences. The old man used to say that humans were the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy, Pete said, taking a bite of his artificial chicken. "He claimed we could outthink any enemy and outfight anyone who tried to hurt our people." Lisa laughed. "That's a nice story, Pete, but look at us now. We haven't had a real military in centuries. Most people don't even know how to fight anymore." "I don't know," Pete said thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder if we really forgot how to fight or if we just chose not to." Jake looked at his engineer with interest. "What do you mean?" Pete shrugged his big shoulders. "Well, think about it. Humans spread across the galaxy faster than any other species in history. We built colonies on worlds that other species couldn't even survive on. And then, suddenly, we became peaceful. Don't you think that's a little strange? Maybe we just grew up as a species," Lisa suggested. "Maybe we realized that fighting was stupid and decided to focus on better things." "Maybe," Pete said. But he didn't look convinced. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Pete had said. It was true that humanity's transformation from a warrior species to a peaceful one had happened very quickly. Most species took thousands of years to change their basic nature. Humans had done it in just a few generations. Jake got up and went to his computer. He started reading old historical records about humanity's last wars. Most of the information was basic stuff that everyone knew. But as he dug deeper, he found some things that seemed odd. Many of the old military bases had never been officially decommissioned. According to the records, they were now historical preservation sites or research facilities. But why would you need so many people to preserve old buildings? And why were there so many civilian organizations that seemed to do the same kind of work that the military used to do? The Emergency Response Corps, the Colonial Security Service, the Deep Space Survey Division, they all sounded like peaceful organizations, but their personnel files showed people with very interesting backgrounds. Jake was starting to get a strange feeling in his stomach. It was the same feeling he got when something was about to go very wrong. He didn't know it yet, but in 6 days, everything would change. The peaceful galaxy that humanity had helped create was about to face its first real test in 3,000 years, and when that test came, the galaxy would learn that some things never really change. They just wait patiently for the right moment to wake up. The attack came at dawn on Haven Prime. The agricultural world was known throughout the galaxy for producing the best food in human space. 2 million people lived there, mostly farmers and their families. They grew crops that fed dozens of other Worlds. Colony Administrator Ben Taylor was having his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. He was a calm man in his 50s who had run Haven Prime for 8 years. The worst emergency he had ever dealt with was a crop disease that destroyed some wheat fields. He was not prepared for what happened next. The Vorthan fleet appeared in the sky like black storm clouds. There were 50 warships, each one bigger than any human vessel anyone had seen in centuries. They moved into position around the planet and waited. Ben rushed to the colony's communication center. His hands were shaking as he tried to contact other human worlds for help. Before he could send a message, a voice filled the air. It was deep and harsh, speaking human language with a strange accent. Humans of Haven Prime. I am War Commander Thexville of the Vorthan Empire. Your species is now under our control. You will surrender immediately and accept Vorthan rule. If you refuse, we will destroy your world and everyone on it. Ben stared at the communication screen. He could see the alien's face, gray skin, 4 arms, and eyes like black stones. This was actually happening. After 3,000 years of peace, someone was attacking human space. You have 1 hour to decide. Thexville continued. Send your answer to my flagship. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Ben alone with the most important decision in Haven Prime's history. He looked around the communication center at his staff. They were all young people who had never seen violence except in old movies. None of them knew what to do. Sir, said Maria Lopez, his deputy administrator, should we contact the Galactic Council? Maybe they can help us negotiate. Ben thought about it. The Galactic Council was good at solving trade disputes and cultural misunderstandings. But this was war, and the Council had no military forces. They couldn't help. No, Ben said quietly. We need to make some calls. Ben walked to his private office and locked the door. He went to his desk and opened a drawer that he had never opened before. Inside was a small black device that looked like a simple communication unit. But it wasn't simple at all. Ben pressed a button on the device. A voice answered immediately, even though Ben had never used the device before and didn't know who he was calling. Emergency Command Center, state your name and situation. This is Colony Administrator Ben Taylor, Haven Prime. We are under attack by an alien fleet. They want us to surrender. Understood, Administrator Taylor. Please hold while we verify. Your identity, there was a pause. Identity confirmed. Administrator Taylor, you are authorized to implement Defense Protocol 7. Do you understand? Ben felt a chill run down his spine. He had never heard of Defense Protocol 7, but somehow he knew exactly what it meant. I understand. Good, help is already on the way. Follow your training and stay calm. My training? Ben asked, confused. I don't have any military training. Check your personal files, Administrator. Everything you need to know is there. And Administrator? Yes? Tell your people not to worry. Humanity doesn't abandon its own. The connection ended. Ben sat staring at the device, wondering what had just happened. Then he remembered what the voice had said about his personal files. He turned to his computer and opened his personnel records. What he saw made his blood run cold. According to the files, Ben Taylor had not always been a colony administrator. Before taking his current job, he had spent 15 years in something called the Terran Strategic Response Division. His training included advanced tactics, emergency command, protocols, and crisis management. Ben had no memory of any of this. But as he read the files, things started coming back to him. Not complete memories, but feelings and instincts. He knew things that he shouldn't know. He understood military terms that he had never learned. Meanwhile, on the other side of human space, strange things were happening. Cargo ships that had been carrying food and supplies suddenly changed course. They were heading toward Haven Prime, but they weren't carrying food anymore. Captain Jake Morrison received an emergency message on the New Horizon. The message came from something called Earth Command, an organization that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Captain Morrison, you are ordered to proceed immediately to Sector 7. New mission parameters are being uploaded to your ship's computer. This is not a drill. Jake stared at the message. Earth Command had been disbanded 3,000 years ago when humanity gave up its military forces. How could they be sending him orders? Pete Wilson appeared on the bridge, looking confused and excited at the same time. Jake, you need to see this. The ship's computer just activated systems that I didn't know we had. Jake followed Pete to the engine room. What he saw there made no sense. The New Horizons' simple research equipment was changing. Panels were sliding away to reveal complex military hardware. The ship's gentle scanning devices were unfolding into weapon systems. How is this possible? Jake asked. Pete grinned. I think my great-grandfather was right about humans. We never really stopped being warriors. We just got very good at pretending. Doctor. Lisa Carter came running from her laboratory. Jake, the artifacts I've been studying, they're not artifacts at all. They're weapons caches. Someone has been maintaining them for thousands of years. Back on Haven Prime, Ben Taylor was preparing to send his answer to the Vorthan fleet. But his message was not what War Commander Thexval expected to hear. War Commander. Thexval, Ben said into the communication system. This is Colony Administrator Ben Taylor. I have considered your demands, and my answer is no. Haven Prime will not surrender. We are not afraid of you. On his flagship, Thexval couldn't believe what he was hearing. You cannot be serious, human. We have 50 warships. You have nothing. We will destroy you. Ben smiled, and for the first time in his life, it was not a peaceful smile. You made a mistake, alien. You assumed we were helpless. That was very stupid of you. What are you talking about? You see, we humans have a saying. It goes like this. Just because we choose not to fight doesn't mean we can't fight. You're about to learn the difference. Thexval was starting to feel worried. The human's voice had changed. He no longer sounded like a frightened administrator. He sounded like someone who had been in battles before. You have no weapons, Thexval said. We have studied your species for years. You are weak. No, Ben replied. You studied what we wanted you to see? You saw the peaceful farmers and artists and scientists. But you never saw the other humans. The ones who have been waiting patiently for someone stupid enough to threaten our people. As Ben spoke, something was happening in space around Haven Prime. Ships were arriving, but they weren't coming from the direction of other human worlds. They were coming from empty space, as if they had been hiding among the stars. These weren't the small civilian vessels that the Vorthans expected. These were warships, sleek and deadly, with weapons that could destroy planets. And there were hundreds of them. War Commander Thexval watched his sensors in growing horror. Where had these ships come from? How had the humans hidden an entire fleet? The answer was simple, but Thexval would never understand it. Humanity had never stopped preparing for war. They had just become very, very good at hiding their preparations. For 3,000 years, human children had learned two sets of lessons. One set was about art, science, and peace. The other set was about tactics, weapons, and survival. Every human colony had hidden defenses. Every civilian ship could become a warship. Every peaceful farmer knew how to fight. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the real human military had been waiting and watching. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice echoed across all communication channels. She was speaking from the bridge of a massive warship that had appeared behind the Vorthan fleet. This is Admiral Sullivan of the Terran. Defense Force, Vorthan vessels, you are surrounded. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction. Thexval looked around at his bridge crew. They were all staring at their instruments in shock. The humans had not just brought a few ships, they had brought an entire battle fleet. Worse, the human ships were using technology that the Vorthans didn't recognize. How many ships do they have? Thexval asked his sensor operator. I don't know, War Commander. My instruments show at least 300, but the readings keep changing. It's like they're using some kind of stealth technology. That's impossible. The humans don't have advanced military technology. Sir, the sensor operator said quietly, I don't think the humans are what we thought they were. Back on Haven Prime, Ben Taylor was watching the battle unfold on his screens. But it wasn't really a battle. It was more like a demonstration. The human ships moved with precision and skill that spoke of constant training and preparation. They surrounded the Vorthan fleet without firing a shot, but everyone could see that they were ready to destroy the invaders in seconds. Ben opened a communication channel to all the farmers and families on Haven Prime. This is your administrator. The threat to our world is over. The cavalry has arrived, and they're reminding our visitors that humans are still human, even after 3,000 years of PIAC. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Retribution, watching the Vorthan fleet surrender. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. For the past 30 years, she had been known throughout the galaxy as the Director of Human Historical Preservation. That was her public job. Her real job was something very different. Kate had been the secret commander of the Terran Defense Force for 3 decades. While the galaxy believed that humanity had no military, Kate had been training soldiers, building weapons, and preparing for the day when someone would be foolish enough to test human resolve. The Vorthan War Commander Thexville appeared on her communication screen. He looked confused and frightened. Admiral Sullivan, we surrender. We did not know that humans still maintained military forces. Kate smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. You didn't know because we didn't want you to know. That was the point. But why? Why did you pretend to be peaceful? We weren't pretending, Kate replied. We chose to be peaceful. There's a difference. Peace was our first choice. War is our second choice. You just made sure we had to pick the second option. The surrender of the Vorthan fleet was just the beginning. Within hours, human ships were moving throughout Vorthan space. But they weren't moving like a normal military force. They were moving like they already knew exactly where. Everything was . Captain Jake Morrison was amazed by what he was seeing. His research vessel, the New Horizon, was now part of a massive human fleet. But this wasn't a fleet that had been assembled quickly. These ships had been waiting, hidden throughout human space, for exactly this moment. Pete, Jake called to his engineer. How long do you think it took to build all these ships? Pete Wilson looked out at the hundreds of warships surrounding them. I don't think they built them recently, Captain. I think they've been building them all along. Dr. Lisa Carter had been studying the data from the Vorthan worlds. What she found made her understand just how thoroughly humanity had been preparing for this day. Jake, look at this, she said, pointing to her computer screen. The humans who have been living in Vorthan space for the past 20 years. The ones who claim to be anthropologists and cultural researchers. What about them? They weren't studying Vorthan culture. They were mapping every military installation, every government building, every strategic resource. They know more about Vorthan defenses than the Vorthans do. Meanwhile, on the Vorthan homeworld of Kreshtar, chaos was spreading. The planet's military command center was trying to coordinate a defense against the human invasion. But their computers weren't working properly. Their communications were being intercepted. Their own weapon systems were refusing to fire. General Vexhar, the supreme military commander of the Vorthan Empire, was screaming at his technicians. How are the humans doing this? How are they inside our systems? A young Vorthan tech officer looked up from his console with fear in his eyes. General, I think the humans have been inside our systems for years. Maybe decades? Every piece of equipment we bought from human traders, every software update we received from human tech companies, every maintenance contract we signed with human engineers, they were all ways for the humans to get access to our networks. General Vexhar felt sick. Are you telling me that the peaceful human traders who sold us our defense systems were actually spies? Yes, sir, and not just spies, they were saboteurs. They built weaknesses into every system they sold us. Weaknesses that they could exploit whenever they wanted. On the human side, the operation was proceeding exactly as planned. Ambassador Claire Davis, who had spent years convincing the galaxy that humans were peaceful, was now coordinating the military campaign from her office in the Galactic Council building. Claire opened a secure communication channel to Admiral Sullivan. Kate, how are we doing? Better than expected, Kate replied. The Vorthans are completely unprepared for real warfare. They're good at bullying weak species, but they have no idea how to fight someone who fights back intelligently. What? About the other members of the Galactic Council? Are they concerned about our sudden military capability? Kate laughed. Concerned? Claire, they're terrified. Half of them are reviewing their own security arrangements, wondering what else they don't know about humanity. The truth was spreading throughout the galaxy as news of the human military response reached other worlds. Species that had considered humans to be their closest friends were suddenly wondering what other secrets humanity had been keeping on the planet Rigel Prime. Ambassador Zextai was in an emergency meeting with his government's council. How? Could we not know? He kept asking. We'd been allies with the humans for centuries. How could they hide an entire military from us? His intelligence chief had been studying human activities for the past day. Sir, I don't think they hid it from us. I think we chose not to see it. Look at these records. The humans have dozens of organizations that we assumed were civilian. The Emergency Response Corps, the Colonial Security Service, the Deep Space Survey Division. We thought these were peaceful organizations. Weren't they? No, sir. They were military units with civilian names. The Emergency Response Corps are actually rapid deployment soldiers. The Colonial Security Service are intelligence operatives. The Deep Space Survey Division are reconnaissance specialists. We saw what we expected to see, not what was really there. Back in human space, the real scope of humanity's deception was becoming clear. Every human colony had hidden military installations. Every civilian ship had concealed weapons. Every peaceful farmer knew how to use military equipment. Ben Taylor, the administrator of Haven Prime, was walking through his colony's emergency command center. A few days ago, he had thought this was just a building where they coordinated responses to natural disasters. Now he could see that it was actually a sophisticated military command post. How did I not know about any of this? He asked Dr. Nancy White, the colony's chief medical officer. It turned out that Dr. White was also a colonel in the Terran Defense Force. You did know, Nancy replied. Part of you always knew. We all have two sets of memories, Ben. One set is for peacetime, and one set is for war. When the emergency started, your wartime memories became active again. That's impossible. Is it? Think about it. How else could humanity maintain military readiness for 3,000 years without anyone noticing? We couldn't risk having our people act like soldiers all the time. So we made sure they could act like soldiers when they needed to. The psychological conditioning of the human population was perhaps the most impressive part of humanity's long deception. Every human child received two educations. The first was in art, science, literature, and philosophy. The second was in tactics, weapons training, survival skills, and military strategy. But the military education was buried deep in their minds, only to be activated in case of emergency. Captain Morrison was beginning to understand this as he watched his crew work. Pete Wilson wasn't just fixing engines anymore. He was coordinating the technical aspects of a space battle with skill that suggested decades of experience. Dr. Carter wasn't just studying old artifacts. She was analyzing enemy weaknesses and suggesting attack strategies. Pete, Jake said, when did you learn to do military engineering? Pete looked up from his work. I think I've always known how to do it. I just wasn't allowed to remember until. Now, the Vorthan Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. Their military commanders were finding that every major decision they had made for the past 20 years had been influenced by human advisors. Every strategic plan had been shared with human analysts. Every weakness had been carefully noted and cataloged. War Commander Thexville, now a prisoner on a human ship, was trying to understand what had happened to his empire. How long have you been planning this? He asked Admiral Sullivan. Planning what? The defense of our territory? We've been planning that since the day we first left Earth. The question isn't how long we've been planning to defend ourselves. The question is why you thought we wouldn't. But you seem so peaceful. Your people talked constantly about art and philosophy and cooperation. We do love art and philosophy and cooperation, Kate replied. But we love our freedom more. And we've learned that sometimes you have to fight to keep your freedom. The speed of the human victory was shocking to everyone except the humans themselves. Within 1 week of the initial attack on Haven Prime, the Vorthan Empire had lost control of half its territory. Within 2 weeks, Vorthan military forces were surrendering on dozens of worlds. But the most disturbing thing for the Vorthans was that the humans weren't acting like conquerors. They weren't destroying cities or enslaving populations. Instead, they were offering protection to species that had been oppressed by the Vorthan Empire. Why are you helping our former subjects? General Vexhar asked during his surrender negotiations. Admiral Sullivan looked at him with something that might have been pity, because that's what civilized people do. We don't fight to destroy, we fight to protect. You never understood the difference between strength and cruelty. As news of the human military campaign spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to reconsider their relationships with humanity. The peaceful traders and diplomats were still there, but now the human fleet arrived at the Vorthan home system like a storm that had been building for 3,000 years. War Commander Thexville, now a prisoner aboard Admiral Sullivan's flagship, watched through the viewing port as hundreds of human ships surrounded his homeworld. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How did you get here so fast? How did you bring so many ships?" Admiral Kate Sullivan stood beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. "We've been here for weeks, Commander. Some of my ships have been in your system for months. You just couldn't see them." Thexville stared at her. "What do you mean, stealth technology, Commander? We've been perfecting it for centuries. Your sensors can't detect our ships when we don't want them to. We've been watching your homeworld, studying your defenses and waiting for the right moment." On the surface of Kreshtar, the Vorthan homeworld, panic was spreading through the government buildings. General Vexhar was in the Planetary Defense Center, trying to coordinate a response to the human invasion. But nothing was working the way it should. "Sir," called out his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender demands from the human fleet. They want us to power down all defensive systems and submit to occupation." "Never!" Vexhar shouted. "We are Vorthans. We do not surrender to inferior species." "Sir, with respect, I don't think the humans are inferior. Our entire fleet has been destroyed or captured. Our allies have abandoned us, and our own defense systems are working against us." General Vexhar looked around the command center. Half of the computer screens were showing error messages. The other half were displaying information that seemed to be coming from the human fleet rather than from Vorthan sources. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. A young technician looked up from her workstation. "General, I think the humans have been inside our systems for much longer than we realized. Remember the maintenance staff that services our computers? About half of them were humans from the technical support company that we hired 5 years ago. So those humans weren't just fixing our computers. They were installing programs that would let them take control of our systems whenever they wanted. Every time we called them to fix a problem, they were actually making our defenses weaker." General Vexhar felt like he was drowning. "Are you telling me that our own defense systems are under human control?" "Yes, sir, and it gets worse. The humans who built our defense systems, the ones who sold us our weapons, the ones who trained our technicians, they were all working together. They've been preparing to defeat us since the day we first met them." Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was leading a small team of human soldiers through the corridors of a Vorthan government building. The building was supposed to be heavily guarded, but the guards were nowhere to be seen. "This is too easy," Jake said to Pete Wilson, who was carrying a device that could override electronic locks. "Where is everyone?" Dr. Lisa Carter was scanning the hallways with her sensors. "Jake, I'm picking up life signs, but they're all in the lower levels. I think the Vorthans are hiding in their bunkers. Can you blame them?" Pete asked. "If I were a Vorthan right now, I'd be hiding too." They reached the main computer center without meeting any resistance. Jake was starting to understand why the human military had been so confident about this operation. The Vorthons had spent decades depending on human technology and human expertise. Now that technology was working against them. Pete connected his device to the main computer system. Within minutes, he had access to the entire Vorthon government database. Jake, you need to see this. The Vorthons have been planning to attack more than just Haven Prime. They were going to invade all of human space. Lisa looked over Pete's shoulder at the computer screen. Look at these battle plans. They were going to hit 12 human worlds simultaneously. They thought they could conquer our entire civilization in one coordinated strike. Jake felt a cold anger building in his chest. They weren't just attacking us. They were trying to destroy us completely. There's more, Pete said, scrolling through the files. They've been studying human psychology for years. They thought they understood how we would react to an attack. They expected us to panic and surrender quickly. Well, they were half right, Lisa said grimly. We did react quickly. Just not the way they expected. Back on Admiral Sullivan's flagship, the interrogation of War Commander Thexville was revealing the full scope of the Vorthon threat. The alien commander had been very cooperative once he realized that resistance was hopeless. Your species was never supposed to be our primary target, Thexville admitted. We were planning to conquer the entire galaxy. Humans were just going to be first because we thought you were the weakest. Admiral Sullivan raised an eyebrow. The weakest? That's an interesting assessment. We studied your communications for years. All we saw were messages about art festivals and scientific conferences. Your people seemed soft and comfortable. We thought you had forgotten how to fight. And what do you think now? Thexville looked out at the human fleet surrounding his homeworld. I think we made the biggest mistake in Vorthon history. We didn't just attack the wrong species. We attacked the most dangerous species in the galaxy while they were pretending to be harmless. Admiral Sullivan nodded. You're learning. Tell me about your other targets. The Rigel Federation was next. Then the crystalline worlds. Then the gaseous collectives. We had plans to conquer 47 different civilizations. And now? Now. We can't even defend our own homeworld. The conversation was interrupted by a communication from the surface of Kreshtar. General Vexhar appeared on the screen, looking defeated and exhausted. Admiral Sullivan, this is General Vexhar, Supreme Commander of Vorthon Forces. I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender. Kate looked at the alien general with something that might have been sympathy. General, before we discuss surrender, I want you to understand something. This war could have been avoided. Humanity offered your species trade, friendship, and cooperation. You chose violence instead. We thought you were weak. No, General. You thought being peaceful was the same as being weak. That was your mistake. What are your terms? Vexhar asked. Complete surrender of all Vorthon military forces. Immediate withdrawal from all occupied territories. Reparations to the species you have conquered. And most importantly, a complete restructuring of your government under human supervision. Vexhar's face showed shock. You want to occupy our homeworld? We want to make sure this never happens again. Your species has been conquering and enslaving others for over 1,000 years. That ends today. And if we refuse? Admiral Sullivan's expression hardened. General, look at your tactical displays. Really look at them. How many functional military units do you have left? Vexhar glanced at his screens. The numbers were devastating. 17 ships out of 800. Maybe 1,000 ground troops out of 50,000? And how many ships does humanity have in your system right now? I don't know. Our sensors show different numbers every time we scan. That's because we're still bringing more ships out of stealth. General, we could destroy your entire civilization in the next 6 hours. We're offering you a chance to survive and rebuild as a peaceful species. I suggest you take it. On the human research vessel New Horizon, Dr. Lisa Carter was making a discovery that would change her understanding of human history forever. She had been analyzing the data they had collected from Vorthon systems, and she found something that shouldn't have existed. Jake, she called excitedly, you need to see this. The Vorthons have records of human activities going back over 1,000 years. Captain Morrison looked at her computer screen. What kind of activities? Military intelligence gathering. The Vorthons have been encountering human spies and observers for centuries. But here's the strange part. According to these records, the humans were always one step ahead of Vorthon expansion plans. Pete Wilson joined them at Lisa's workstation. What does that mean? It means that humanity has been watching the Vorthons for a very long time. Every world the Vorthons conquered, every species they enslaved, every military technology they developed, the humans knew about it. Jake felt a chill. Are you saying that humanity knew the Vorthons were a threat and just waited for them to attack? I think humanity has been waiting for someone to make this mistake. The Vorthons just happened to be the first species stupid enough to actually do it. The implications were staggering. For 3,000 years, humanity had been presenting a peaceful face to the galaxy while secretly monitoring every potential threat. They hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been preparing for this specific war. Ambassador Claire Davis was having a very different conversation with the Galactic Council. The emergency session had been called to address the human military situation, as some species were now calling it. Ambassador Davis, said Representative Colfax from the Methane Worlds, the Council is concerned about humanity's sudden display of military power. We were not aware that your species maintained such extensive armed forces, Claire smiled politely. Representative Colfax, humanity has always maintained the ability to defend itself. We simply chose not to advertise that fact. But the scale of your military response suggests preparation that goes far beyond simple self-defense. Yes, it does. We've been preparing for Thea. 6 months after the fall of the Vorthon Empire, the galaxy had settled into a new kind of peace. It was different from the old peace, though. This peace had teeth. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, which was now orbiting the former Vorthon homeworld of Kreshtar. The planet looked peaceful from space, but Jake knew that appearances could be deceiving. He had learned that lesson very well. The transformation of Kreshtar had been remarkable. Under human supervision, the planet was becoming something it had never been before, a world dedicated to helping other species recover from centuries of Vorthon oppression. Dr. Lisa Carter joined Jake at the viewing port. She had spent the last 6 months studying Vorthon history and helping to design rehabilitation programs for former Vorthon soldiers. Any regrets? Lisa asked. Jake thought about it. About the war? No. About the fact that it had to happen? Yes. The Vorthons are adapting well to their new situation. Most of them seem relieved that they don't have to be conquerors anymore. Most of them? Well, there are still some who think they should be ruling the galaxy. But they're a small minority, and they're getting smaller every day. Pete Wilson appeared in the doorway, carrying a datapad with the latest reports from around the galaxy. His official title was now Chief Engineering Officer of the Terran Reconstruction Fleet, but he still preferred to be called Pete. How are the other former Vorthon worlds doing? Jake asked. Better than expected, Pete replied, looking at his data. Turns out that most of the species the Vorthons conquered are pretty good at governing themselves when given the chance. Who would have thought? And the Vorthons who are living on those worlds? Mixed results? Some of them are trying to integrate with the local populations. Others are asking to be relocated to human space. A few are still causing trouble, but not many, Jake nodded. The aftermath of the war had been almost as complicated as the war itself. Humanity had found itself responsible for rebuilding an entire sector of the galaxy. It was not a responsibility they had wanted, but it was one they had accepted. On Earth, President Linda Hayes was meeting with her cabinet to discuss the ongoing reconstruction efforts. Linda had been a literature professor before the war. Her background in conflict resolution and cultural studies had made her the perfect person to lead humanity's post-war government. Admiral Sullivan, Linda said, looking at the reports from the former Vorthon territories. How long do you think it will take to complete the reconstruction? Kate Sullivan, now serving as Secretary of Galactic Affairs, considered the question. carefully, at least 10 years, maybe 20. We're not just rebuilding infrastructure. We're trying to change the fundamental culture of an entire region of space. And our own people? How are they adjusting to the new reality? Better than I expected. Most humans seem to understand that this was necessary. They don't like war. But they understand that sometimes you have to fight to protect peace. What about the psychological conditioning? Are there any long-term effects from activating people's buried military training? Dr. Nancy White, now serving as director of Human Health Services, had been studying this question for months. So far, the effects seem to be positive. People report feeling more confident and capable. Many of them are saying that they feel like they understand themselves better now. Any negative effects? Some people are having trouble adjusting back to purely civilian life. They want to stay active in defense-related work. We're finding positions for them in the reconstruction efforts. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Claire Davis was addressing a very different kind of meeting. The Council had changed significantly since the war. Several new species had joined, mostly former Vorthan subjects who were now free to participate in galactic governance. The question before us today, Claire said to the assembled representatives, is how to prevent this kind of situation from happening again. Representative Colfax from the Methane Worlds raised one of his tentacles. Ambassador Davis, the Council appreciates humanity's efforts to stabilize the former Vorthan territories. But many of our governments are concerned about the precedent. This sets what kind of precedent? The precedent of one species taking unilateral military action against another, even when that action is justified. Claire had been expecting this question. Representative, I understand your concern. But I want to remind the Council that humanity did not start this war. We finished it. Yes, but you finished it very quickly and very decisively. That suggests a level of military preparation that goes far beyond simple self-defense. That's correct. Humanity has always maintained the ability to defend itself and its allies. We will continue to do so. Ambassador Zextai from Rigel Prime leaned forward. Ambassador, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't use this military power against other species in the future? Claire smiled. The same guarantee you've had for the past 3,000 years, Ambassador? Our word, humanity chose peace. Once, and we're choosing it again. But we're choosing it from a position of strength, not weakness. And if another species threatens the peace, then they will discover what the Vorthans discovered. Peace is not the absence of the ability to fight. Peace is the choice not to fight when you could. Back on Kreshtar, War Commander Thexville was working in a rehabilitation center for former Vorthan military officers. It was strange work for someone who had once commanded a fleet of warships. But Thexville was finding it more satisfying than he had expected. The center was run by humans. But it employed Vorthans, former Vorthan subjects, and volunteers from dozens of different species. The goal was to help former Vorthan soldiers learn how to live in a peaceful galaxy. Thexville was teaching a class on galactic history to a group of young Vorthans, who had grown up believing that conquest was the natural order of things. It was hard work, but important work. The question is not whether the Vorthan Empire was strong, Thexville was saying to his students. The question is whether strength is the same thing as power. One of his students, a young female named Kessara, raised her hand. What's the difference? Strength is the ability to protect what you care about. Power is the ability to take what others care about. The Vorthan Empire had power. Humanity has strength. But the humans defeated us completely. Doesn't that mean they have more power than we did? Thexville considered this carefully. The humans could have destroyed our entire civilization. They had the power to do that, but they chose not to. Instead, they're helping us rebuild as something better. That's not power. That's strength. Another student spoke up. Why should we trust them? How do we know they won't turn on us when it's convenient? Because, Thexville replied, they've had 3,000 years to conquer the galaxy and they chose not to. They've had 6 months to destroy us and they chose not to. If they wanted to be conquerors, they would have done it already. On Haven Prime, The agricultural world where the war had begun, life was returning to normal. The farms were producing food again, families were rebuilding their homes, and children were playing in the fields, but things were different now. Everyone knew that the peaceful farmers who grew their food were also trained soldiers who could defend their world if necessary. Everyone knew that the cargo ships that carried supplies could become warships at a moment's notice. Colony Administrator Ben Taylor was walking through the main settlement, checking on the reconstruction progress. His assistant Maria Lopez was with him, carrying a datapad with reports from around the colony. "How are people adjusting to the new reality?" Ben asked. "Surprisingly well," Maria replied. "Most people say they feel safer now that they know humanity can defend itself. But there are some who are worried about what this means for our peaceful way of life." "What do you tell them?" "I tell them that we're still the same people we always were. We still value art, science, and cooperation. We still want to build a better galaxy for everyone. We're just not willing to let anyone destroy what we've built." Ben nodded. That seemed like a reasonable way to think about it. Humanity had not changed its fundamental values. They had simply revealed the strength that had always been there. Dr. Lisa Carter had published a paper about her discoveries during the war. The paper was titled, "The Archaeological Evidence for Continuous Human Military Preparation, 21565-024 CE." It had become required reading at universities throughout the galaxy. The paper's conclusion was simple, but profound. Humanity had never stopped being a warrior species. They had simply become warriors who fought for peace instead of conquest. The galaxy was learning to live with this new reality. Trade continued. Cultural exchanges flourished. Scientific cooperation expanded. But everyone now understood that this peaceful civilization was protected by the most effective military force in galactic history. 6 months after the war, Admiral Kate Sullivan received a visitor in her office on Earth. It was War Commander Vexvol, who had been granted permission to visit the human homeworld as part of his rehabilitation program. "I have a question," Vexvol said as he looked out at the peaceful cityscape below Kate's office window. "What's that?" "When we first attacked Haven Prime, you said that humanity doesn't abandon its own. What did you mean by that?" Kate smiled. "I meant exactly what I said. Every human on every world in every sea